Now, Lima Muraku visits the city and county of Dublin and also calls on the Newgrange site in neighbouring County Meath in this rich and rare land of ours.
Newgrange, monument of prehistoric times. Slane, where Patrick lit a fire that changed the heart of Ireland. A Catholic church, a grateful Protestant helped to found. A monument to the Fenian, John Boyle O'Reilly. Francis Ledwidge, who would never again hear the Bitterton cry after he was killed in Ypres in 1917. All of these, literally on Dublin's doorstep, are part of the story of this rich and rare land. Gandon's Custom House, seat of the commercial and mercantile strength of Ireland, when briefly we had our own parliament, but under British colonial rule. 200 years on, the Financial Services Centre beside it is now daily in touch with similar centres around the world. Yet, within an hour's drive of here, there are places so old in time that they go back to the very dawn of our history. Beside the Boyne in Meath is one of them, Newgrange, reliably dated to before the year 3000 BC, hence several centuries older than the pyramids of ancient Egypt. This was Brú Daide, or Brú na Boine, the hosting house of the Daide, Dia, the good god, and of his wife Boine, goddess of the river to which he gives its name. These were the mythological people, Tuatha Dé Danann, supposed inhabitants of Ireland before the coming of the Celts. The solstice, standstill of the sun, shows the thin line of the Boyne through the passage entrance. This is dawn on the 21st of December, midwinter day. As the sun rises, a russet glow fills the mouth of the passage, and a shaft of light pours through the slit in the roof, lighting the whole chamber below. It's a spectacular sight, full of the mysteries of life and death, of gods and kings and pagan rituals through long centuries in this ancient place, long before ever we came on the scene to ask questions and demand answers to them with the tyranny of the generation that happens to be walking around. Brú na Boine, above the rich plains of Royal Meath, burial place of kings, but not a King Cormac MacArt. He, the annals tell us, was the first Irish skeptic, the first to provoke the enmity of the pagan priests by declaring that he could not have faith in gods of stone made with an axe by the hands of men.
Crown Cruach and his sub-gods 12, King Cormac said, are carven treen, the axe that made them, haft and helve, had worthier of our worship been. But he who made the tree to grow, and hid in earth the iron stone, and made the man with mind to know the axe's use, is God alone. So spread not the beds of brew for me, when restless deathbed's use is done, but bury me at Rosnaree, and face me to the rising sun. His glory lightens from the east. His message soon shall reach our shore, and idol god and cursing priest shall plague us from my schlacht no more.
But the Boyne, a river of myth and mystery, has a more recent history, if by any stretch of the imagination an event that happened 300 years ago can be called recent. Yet, as we know only too well, that event, the annual parades commemorating the victory of the Protestant Dutchman, King William of Orange, over his father-in-law, the Catholic King James, comes alive up north on the 12th of July each year. Such are the pretty disastrous consequences of what happened 300 years ago on the green, grassy slopes of the Boyne. It was here, in a place now known as King William's Glen, that the future of Ireland, the English crown and the European balance of power were decided.
At the Boyne Bridge we took our first beating. From the bridge at Slane there was great retreating, and then we were beaten at Aughrim too. Oh, fragrant Ireland, that was goodbye to you.
Slane Abbey, on the hill of Slane, one of the great historic and religious landmarks of Ireland. The ruins here date from a mere 500 years ago, but the story of Slane goes back a lot farther than that. For it was here that Patrick lit the Paschal fire on Easter Eve, whether he knew it or not, in defiance of an edict of Laira, the High King, that on pain of death, no fire should be lit while the great fire at Tara was burning. Fire played an important part in pagan Ireland and was recognised in the Brehon laws as an indication of challenge in cases of territorial dispute. Well might the haughty High King have been alarmed at this challenge to his power from a prominent hill within sight of his palace home. And from what small, unpromising, indeed imperiled beginnings has the legendary faith of us Irish come.
Light of our hope, St. Patrick, patron of our nation, name above all other names, guardian of God's creation. Druids' laws and rigid rules, hard-hearted beyond call, haughty, proud their pagan schools, you have reduced them all. The hills and glens of Ireland, the towns of our island home, forever freed from stifling bonds, the Druid's power is gone. We ask of you, our patron, pray for our Irish homes, by day, by night, be at our side. Patrick, our very own.
King Laira is not the only royal name to be associated with the hill of Slane. At a time of chaos and disorder in eastern France, a young son of the reigning king who had died was spirited away and hidden in the monastery of Slane, to return years later and be enthroned as king. There's another interesting French connection with the village of Slane. A Colonel Cunningham of the Mount Charles family was in France during the time of the Revolutionary Wars, and he was taken prisoner, was being tried for his life, when somebody came into the Collège d'Irlande, the Irish college in Paris, and inquired if anybody knew a Colonel Cunningham. A young priest, Father Michael O'Hanlon from around these parts, said yes, he did. He came forward and gave evidence to the tribunal which saved the Colonel's life. Years later, the Colonel wanted to thank him for that when he had become parish priest of Slane. He asked him where did they have a church. He said, we worship in a barn. And so he gave him a site, and he gave him a great deal of help towards the building of this Mount Charles Church. 1798, when the building started, was a troubled time in Ireland. This gift by a Protestant gentleman to the Catholic people is some indication of how things could be if Wolfe Tone's dream were a reality. Catholic Protestant dissenter unite. Three relics of old history within a few yards of each other. The 5,000-year-old passage grave at Douth near Newgrange in County Meath. And there, a 12th, 13th century Franciscan abbey where the monks prayed and chanted their psalms. And here, a monument to one of the great Fenians, one of the great notable journalists, poets and writers of the Irish diaspora in Australia and in the United States, John Boyle O'Reilly.
The world is large, John Boyle O'Reilly wrote. The world is large, when its weary leagues, two loving hearts divide, but the world is small when your enemy is loose on the other side. The world is smaller today, though the enemy of John Boyle O'Reilly is no longer a hostile power. Indeed, across the gulfs and barriers that now divide us, we must remember that there are no permanent enemies. Hostility today is a fact, but it is not a ruling law. The supreme reality of our time is our indivisibility as children of God and the common vulnerability of this planet.
President John F. Kennedy addressing the Houses of the Oireachtas on the occasion of his memorable visit in 1963. It's appropriate that the Irish and US flags should fly in unison here at John Boyle O'Reilly's place of birth. The nearby tumulus at Douth, like Newgrange, has passage graves of great antiquity, so much so that the ruined old abbey beside us is a mere infant of 800 years compared to us. Such is the depth of history in this quiet place, and such the span of human living in this rich and rare land. A well in the backyard of a cottage near Slane, from which the Ledwidge family once drew water. For this was the home of the poet Francis Ledwidge, Frank as he was locally known. Ledwidge was killed in the Battle of Ypres in 1917, within a year of the execution of his friend, the 1916 leader Thomas MacDonagh. He might have been writing for both of them when he wrote his best-known poem.
He shall not hear the bittern cry in the wild sky where he is lain, nor voices of the sweeter birds above the wailing of the rain.
Pearl Baxter knew all about Ledwidge and his unhappy love affair with Slane girl Ellie Vahy.
And this is the thirsting stone where they used to meet Ellie and Frank upon the hill of Slane on her father's farm. Her father this time had died, but she lived up on the hill of Slane. So they did a lot of their courting up around this thirsting stone on the hill, on the side of the hill.
Do you remember now, growing up around these parts, any poem of Ledwidge's that you especially liked?
Oh yes, yes. There was the Bound to the Mast was one, and then there was another one about when he left Slane. He was only 50. He wrote this when he was only 15 years of age. I walked the old frequented ways that wind around the tangled braes. I live again the sunny days, ere I the city knew. And scenes of old again are born, the woodbine lassoing the thorn, and drooping root-like in the corn, the poppies weep the dew. Above me in the 100 schools, the magpies bend their young to rules, and like an apron full of jewels, the dewy cobweb swings. And frisking in the stream below, the troutlets make the circles row, and a hungry crane that watch them grow as a smoker does his rings. And wondrous, impudently sweet, half in passion, half conceit, the blackbird calls adown the street like the piper of Hamelin. I hear him, and I feel the lure, calling me back to the homely moor. I'll go and close the mountain's door on the city's strife and din.
The Ledwidge name is very visible in Slane, as it deserves to be for someone who loved the place so much. I have seen so much of war from Suvla Bay to Serbia and now France that I am sick of it, he wrote. I hear the roads of Slane calling me and the hills and the river wondering where I am. It's terrible to be always homesick. The Ledwidge Cottage is now a museum run by the Slane Community Council, who have restored it, exterior and interior, to what it would have looked like in his time. It's a homely place, which must have been very much in his mind when he wrote,
Broom out the floor now, lay the fender by, and plant this bee-sucked bough of woodbine there, and let the window down. The butterfly floats in upon the sunbeam, and the fair tanned face of June, the nomad gypsy, laughs above her widespread wares, the while she tells the farmers' fortunes in the fields, and quaffs the water from the spider-peopled wells.
Poet and writer Lord Dunsany befriended the young Ledwidge. he became the patron the penniless young poet needed. His mother, widowed with 7 children, could do nothing for him. She, one of the plain people around him in Slane, like the fiddler Matty Maguna, could come when all were sad and steal away our fears. A showcase in the front room has memorabilia of his life and times, including some first editions of his books. On the death of his sweetheart, Ellie Vahy, he wrote,
A blackbird singing on a moss-upholstered stone, bluebells swinging, shadows wildly blown. A song in the wood, a ship on the sea. The song was for you, the ship was for me.
And the ship led to the bombs and the shells of Flanders, Ypres and the Somme, to a grave in Passchendaele, to the regimental medals to be sent home as they went like lambs to the slaughter. The Mons Star, the medal for long service and good conduct, the one for honour and bravery, when all he wanted was to hear the bittern cry in the wild sky where he is lain, and the music of Matty Maguna's fiddle to lift his heart in the evening when the light failed and the lamp was lit and the candle stood in the window. Newgrange Mall, in the village of Slane, a tastefully done streetscape, has an interesting craft studio run by Mary MacDonald and Aladdin's cave of fine craftwork, much of it locally done. Here, the themes of myth and legend that surround Newgrange and the Boyne abound. The burnished dishes, the pagan burial places, Finn McCool's salmon of wisdom, source of all knowledge. The standing stones ornamented in honour of some ancient god, and more day-to-day things too, personally designed quilts, cushions, leatherwork, jewellery, much of it done with an eye to the story of Slane's long historic past. Slane Castle, whose towers and embattled parapets were built by the Conyngham family, one of whom was that Colonel Conyngham who donated the site for the Mount Charles Chapel. In recent times, the surrounding grounds became famous as a huge open-air concert venue.
Pleasant to be in Biown-Éidir, white waves down from the heather, full lovely hill above ships and the sea, wine-coloured slopes in all weather. Eving ve hem Biown-Éidir, eving ve o sa bánver, Knoch lánver, lungver, líonver, Biown Ianver, Anver, Áver.
Howth Harbour. In there, in the year 1587, sailed Grania Whale, Grace O'Malley, the pirate queen of Mayo. She was returning from a visit to another queen, Queen Elizabeth of England. She stopped off here looking for what we in our time would call bed and breakfast. She wanted hospitality for the night, and she came to Howth Castle to find the gates locked and barred against her. She was a fiery particle, this lady was, and she stormed off in a rage, went off down, and there, playing on the strand beside the harbour, was young Lord Howth. So she grabbed him, kidnapped him effectively, and brought him back to Mayo with her, and sent a letter to the St. Lawrence's of Howth Castle to tell them that they could have their son back as soon as they gave an undertaking that those gates would never again be locked and barred, and there would always be a place laid at the table for the unexpected guest.
It's a tradition, we were reliably informed, that is maintained within these walls to this day, though on this visit we were too busy to test it. What is certain is that the name of the pirate queen of Connacht, Grace O'Malley, is indeed remembered, and in a very obvious way, as she presides over the fortunes and misfortunes of Howth's golfers, as they look down upon the fastnesses of Lambay and Island's Eye. There are pathways through the woods in Howth which make good walking on a fine day. But these are tracks which were tread long centuries before our time and are still celebrated in poem and story. Balnader comes up often in the poetry of the Fianna of Finn McCool, and this cromlech is reputed to be Éadín's grave. Éadín, daughter of Angus of Balnader, who, as Sir Samuel Ferguson tells us, died of grief at the loss of her husband Oscar at the Battle of Garva near Tara in the year 284.
They heaved the stone, they heaped the cairn. Said Oisin, in a queenly grave we leave her among fields of fern, between the cliff and wave. A clear, pure air pervades the scene in loneliness and awe secure. Meet spot to sepulchre a queen who in her life was pure. The cliff behind stands clear and bare above, the heathery steep scales the clear heaven's expanse to where the Danann druids sleep. Here, far from camp and chase removed, apart in nature's quiet room, the music that alive she loved shall cheer her in the tomb. Then o'er Our Lady's placid dream, where safe from storms she sleeps, may steal such joy as will not misbeseem a queen of men to feel. A cup of bodkin penciled clay holds Oscar, mighty heart and limb, one handful now of ashes grey, and she has died for him. Of Oscar and Éadín bereft, so Oisin sang. The Fenians sped three mighty shouts to heaven and left Balnader to the dead.
Howth, with Island's Eye beyond, the last sight of Ireland for many on the outbound voyage. The waves dashing against Balnader are remembered in a poem by Columcille, the first exile. And down below the summit of Howth is the Cyclops Eye of the Bailey, remembered by James Joyce as he sailed away to silence, exile, cunning. At least those were voluntary emigrants, not like the millions who are forced to go and still go, admittedly nowadays in luxury ships like the Isle of Innisfree. But while this national bloodletting continues, one may reasonably ask, can this island ever be what it certainly has the potential to be, a rich and rare land?